with L.Nathan Hare. The phone lines are now open at 837-1112, and we encourage your questions and comments. Now, without further ado, here's your host, L.Nathan Hare.
All right, here we go. Living now, living right now. This is L.Nathan Hare, your host here for this next hour at WFO Power 96.5 FM on your dial. Our principal sponsor, of course, the Community Action Organization of Western New York, still fighting the war on poverty, now in our 53rd year. I want to welcome all of you again to this hour of insight, introspection, and interpretation of facts, events, and trends affecting you right here and right now in Buffalo and the Western New York community, and in fact, connect you to communities all across the country. Each week we focus on things we think will be of interest to you, which will serve to motivate you and serve to connect you to the broader issues that affect our communities here in Western New York. Now, today's program is live, so you can call in, you can join our discussion if you will. Our number here again is 837-1112. That's 837-1112. Of course, I'm here with Emmanuel Radford, who does the live streaming of our program. If you have a computer around, if you got your laptop, your tablet, your other handheld device, you can type in Facebook. And once you get on to Facebook, type in Living Now, Living Now, N-O-W. Just type in Living Now and the program will come up. You can actually see us talking on the program. But the important thing is that you can type in your questions, your observations, or your concerns, and Emmanuel will get those to me, and we'll try to get an answer, at least the best answer we can give you. We will give you on the air as we move along. I want to use today's program first to introduce something that's going on in our community, a response to the violence that we continue to be plagued by in our community. It's not just us. I mean, this is something that is happening all around the country. I get so annoyed, Emmanuel, when people talk about it's summertime, it's hot. So what does that mean? Because it's hot, all of a sudden, your guns come out of the holsters or whatnot, the swords come out, you can't stop hitting people because it's hot. What does hot have to do with it, right? We keep latching on to superficial analyses and not tackling the fundamentals. We had a rally meeting was held at the Community Action Organization's headquarters at 45 Jewett Avenue. I just want you to know we say it's 45 Jewett Avenue. That's the legal address. It's really on the corner of Halbert and Leroy, okay, just so we don't get confused. But this was last Thursday, July 5th. A meeting was convened by a coalition of peacekeeping organizations, the peacekeepers themselves, SNUG, Stop the Violence, a number of other community-based organizations. It was led by Neil Dobbins, who many of you know has been working in both bringing together youth sports initiatives to try to keep young people positively engaged and under the mentorship of caring adults. My son, Kenny Simmons, who was the director of youth services for the city of Buffalo for the Department of Community Services, and a number of other folks who have been very helpful. David Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, one of the leaders of this initiative. The murder of a 17-year-old child and a 54-year-old grandmother, along with the shooting of two non-lethal shootings of two other adults, has sort of galvanized many in the community to do whatever they can to try to bring an end to this violence, to do whatever they can to make this just stop allowing this curse to fall upon our community. I look at it as a curse. Many of you probably don't think in these terms if you're not a person who walks in the circles of African-centered people. But Dr. Marimba Ani wrote a book called Yurugu. And in this book, she talks about these concepts of things that help us to understand what the cosmology was, the worldview was of African people before we came to the United States, before we came to the Americas. One of the concepts she talks about is something called ma'afa. Ma'afa is a word that really means that something malignant. Now, I know y'all know what that word means, right? Like if you got cancer and they say it's malignant, you know what that means. That means that the sword of Damocles is now falling on your neck. It's not above you. It is now on your neck. And so Ma'afa refers to a malignancy that is in the spirit that is overwhelming the people of a community to the point that you can't see your way out. It's just suffocating everything around you. It is turning everything that you touch into something vile. That's what we have going on right now. We got to call things what they are. This is not something that somebody from some other nation is doing, to people in the city of Buffalo. This is something that people in the city of Buffalo are doing to themselves. Got to own up to this, because if you don't face your problem, you can't solve it. Problems do not solve themselves. All the people that tell you that you'll grow out of it are lying to you. Okay, you will not grow out of it. You'll just become bigger doing it. That's all that's going to occur, right? So we got to get our arms around this thing, because this is a malignancy that is like a cancer. It is eating at our soul. So we actually have gotten to a point where we accept. That's what I mean when we start talking about it's hot. I just want to hit people. And I know I shouldn't be saying that, because we're supposed to be not talking about violence and whatnot, or anti-violence. But you can't take the position that because it's hot, it is somehow a part of the norm that we accept for our community. Oh, there's going to be 6, murders, the first week of June because it got hot, right? There's going to be 4 murders, in the first week of July because it got hot. No, that's just not acceptable. None of that is acceptable. And so this movement that has come about, please write this down. It's called the Most Valuable Parents Movement, the MVP movement. And so instead of us worrying about whether LeBron James or James Harden or, Stephen Curry or somebody else gets to be the MVP, for this year, how about we become the MVPs of our own communities? How about we recognize who are the most valuable players that make it possible for us to stand our community up so that we can live in peace, in harmony, that we can live in a way that we're productive, that everybody is all in producing resources that are necessary so that we can pay our cable bills, we can cut our lawns, we can pick up the litter in our communities, we can care for our children, we can keep the noise down of people arguing and so on in our communities, that we're not trapped by drinking and drugging and that sort of nonsense. That's what we've got to get our arms around. That's what we've got to get done. And that's what this MVP movement is about. Now, I'm supporting the MVP movement. I don't want to give people the impression I'm the author of it. This is not Nate Hare, authoring something. People come and they say, man, this is something that we think needs to get done. I agree. So I'm doing what I expect all of us as adults to do. When you see a way forward that is going to be helpful for us to solve the problem that is in front of us, you can't just sit around and sulk about it. You can't just dog somebody else and say, oh, he thinks he's this or that. You got to join people that are trying to help and help them do the helping. So that's what Nate Hare is doing as a person. That's what the CAO is doing as an organization. We're not trying to become, the godfather of MVP. We're trying to help those people that have brought the MVP movement to Buffalo. We're trying to help them to succeed in making that happen within our community. So I'm going to come back to this a number of times in today's program. Please get your paper and pencil handy. Write this down. There's going to be another meeting. I didn't tell you this, but so that we understand the process. What the MVP movement is trying to do is to convene people in different regions of the city. So we're not trying to bring the entire city of Buffalo to the conference room of the Community Action Organization. That dog's not going to hunt, because our conference room is not that big. So what we're trying to do is to bring people from different regions. So this week, the organization, the MVP initiative, which is not actually it's not a not-for-profit organization, it's just the name of a movement. The MVP movement is going to be meeting at the Community Action Organization at 45 Jewett Parkway on the corner of Halbert and Leroy. But we're going to be focusing on people in the Central Park area of Buffalo. And I think we did a little bit of that last week. That's going to be the big focus for this week. I don't know what the schedule is. We'll find out on Thursday about what the next area is. This is probably something that we're going to be doing over the course of the next 6 or 7 weeks. trying to get people in each of these areas to come together and then use this as a way to help people figure out amongst themselves, how can we be supportive of each other? Now, when I say being supportive of each other, I was talking to Emmanuel before we got on the air about how things used to be, and I know y'all get tired of me talking about how things used to be, okay? But it used to be when we had 600,000 people living in the city of Buffalo, you'd have like 15 murders in the entire city for the year. Now you got 300,000, less than 300,000 people living in the city of Buffalo, and you're getting 4 or 5 murders a month. Something's wrong, with this story, okay? There must be something that we were doing differently in 1950 than what we're doing in 2018. And what I'm suggesting to us is, if you don't know the way out of the wilderness that you're in, but you know that there was a time when people didn't live in the wilderness, do whatever they did when they didn't live in the wilderness. Don't even try to figure it out, okay? Just whatever they did, whatever time they went to bed, go to bed at that time. Whenever they ate, eat at that time. It just seems to me that if you really want to stop this stuff from happening, you have to let go of everything that you are doing now that you were not doing then, so that you can return your community to the kind of character that it had before all of this insanity occurred. Now, I need for y'all to understand, there used to be gangs in Buffalo. When I grew up, there were the Flying Dutchmen, the Gaylords, there was the Warlords, there was the Projecteers. There were gangs, but the gangs fought by appointment. Y'all not hearing me, because you a little younger. Y'all not hearing me. Lee know what I'm talking about. He's old enough to remember this, right? In those days, somebody would tell you somewhere along the way in school, at 2:45, we're going to meet over on the corner of Wohlers and Glenwood. And we'd come and we'd rumble, at that time. And the fights wouldn't last more than 10 or 12 minutes because we get tired. I mean, the truth is, we weren't track stars. We only had just so much condition, right? So we'd fight for about 10, 12 minutes and whatnot. Then we'd all sit down. Both sides, would sit down on the stoops and the corners and the curbs and whatnot, and huffing and puffing and selling wolf tickets to each other about who got who hit who the hardest, and so on. And then we'd all walk away to wherever we came from. And it wasn't just us. I mean, we would fight people in South Buffalo on appointment. Seriously, we go down South Park to Elk Street and whatnot. We fight by appointment, right? So, I mean, what we're doing now, what we've allowed to take over our spirits now, is so different. We've allowed people to change us as a community of people. We have to change back into who we were before this kind of violent culture got in control of us. So I needed to get this thought out before we get to the break. Let me just share some elements to you. I took this from an article written by Rochelle Mangiovi that she had written for WIVB.com. And she talked about the fact that this was the first week of June of this year. She talked about it being a deadly week of shootings. And some of the people that were talked about in this article were from the Buffalo Peacemakers and from SNUG. And I'm sure that Neil and Kenny would confirm this. There was, at that point, about 21 homicides had taken place during the course of the year, which was not that different from what had been taking place in previous years. I mean, it was almost the same pace that we had with murders in previous in the previous year. And so what they were talking about was that there was, in fact, I'm not even going on that detail. What Tim Newkirk said, I think I want to express. This was, I think, the most important thing. Tim Newkirk works for is a supervisor in the Buffalo SNUG program, and he characterized it this way. He said, "There's no beef out there that is worth taking a human life, period." Now, Tim said a lot of things, right? But I just wanted to focus on the thing that I think we just need to understand. There is no such thing as a beef that exists between us as people that's worth us taking one of each other's lives. That just cannot be. talking about in Rochelle's article about what had been taking place that week. This is like the first week or so of June of this year. On Thursday of that week, a 21-year-old man was shot and killed on Fillmore Avenue. The very next day, shots were fired outside an Eastside elementary school. Hours later that day, a 16-year-old girl was shot on Carl Street. She remains in critical condition at Children's Hospital. Her crime was sitting on her porch while not being a member of a gang. I guess that's the new crime in Buffalo now, sitting on your porch as a child without being a member of a gang. That's the new crime. And then on Saturday of that week, a 28-year-old man died after being shot on Bailey Avenue outside a bowling alley. I think this is Kearns Lanes, a black-owned bowling alley. I mean, how many black-owned bowling alleys are there in the United States? You got a black-owned bowling alley in Buffalo, and you're killing people in front of, I mean, you want development to take place, within the city, and then the very things that develop, because we want them to develop, we bring this malignancy, this ma'afa, we bring that over those spaces. We've got to control this ourselves. So a group of people that I talked about before involved in anti-violence groups, the SNUG program, the Stop the Violence program, the Peacekeepers initiative, the MVP organization is sort of a coalition of all of these efforts and others, church leaders, my son Kenny Simmons, the city of Buffalo, a whole grouping of people are coming together trying to recruit 1,000 parents to help put an end to the violence. So when I was telling you before that in the conversation I was having with Emmanuel before we got started, one of the things that, when we were off the air, one of the things that I think that we have to do is we have to turn these ma'afa, these malignant people, we have to turn them into aliens in our communities. When I say turn them into aliens in our communities, I mean we can't become the perpetrators of violence ourselves, because violence only breeds more violence. It never ends. You just get on this. You ever see the little articles they have, or little analogies they have about the squirrel in the barrel? So they put this little barrel, that's on an axle and whatnot. You throw a squirrel in there, and the squirrel can't get out. They keep running, trying to get out, and the more it runs, the more the barrel turns. The more the barrel turns, the more the squirrel runs. It just never ends. Well, that's what this violence on violence is. It's the same scenario. So we don't want to become perpetrators of violence ourselves. I don't want the police to be perpetrating violence on violent people in our communities. What I want us to do is to end the possibility that some malignant human being can come and sit at your mother's kitchen table and, unravel their drugs or clean their guns, selling wolf tickets, swearing at the top of their lungs. And that cannot be. We have to go back to order in our communities. We as adults have to establish the standards that we want people to live by in our community. So when you hear a child swearing, you got to say, baby, let's not do that. We don't do that. If you just have to swear, there's a tree over there, go behind the tree, put your hand over your mouth, and just swear at the tree, okay? But please don't do that around us. You see somebody getting, overly loud and aggressive, you got to say, please, baby, don't do that. Don't do that here, okay? We don't do that here. If you and this person can't get along, it's okay. You go your way, and that way y'all get along, because you're not along with each other. Let's do that, right? We don't colonize, territories in our communities. If you live on Rare and Winslow, and you live on Rose and Carlton, you're still part of the same community. You're still part of the same colony. Wherever we go, it's us. Wherever we are, we're in the presence of us. That's the way we've got to look at ourselves. There can't be any other agenda. So turn your undershirts, outside out and the inside in, right? leave your hats on your head, whatever way the hat was supposed to be. You don't need to be writing on your cells, putting marks on your cells, and so on. You just need to start thinking through, how do you get from being where you are to a place where you're in control of food, clothing, shelter, your cable TV, your health care, and your retirement. Start getting that stuff nailed down. That's what we got to do. So listen, we're asking people to come together. The next meeting is going to be on Thursday of this week. Let's see, that's the 12th or the 13th. I think it's the 13th. Right. So it'll be a Thursday of this week. It'll be at 6 o'clock. Please. It's the 12th. It'll be on Thursday the 12th at 6 o'clock at the Community Action Organization headquarters on the corner of Halbert and Leroy. And so please come, try to be on time. What we want to do is to try to help people understand what our ideas are about how we can help us help ourselves. This is not something, I know that we always appeal to the police department to do this and that. And I mean, the police department will do what the police department can do. I don't think that we're going to solve this by just going to the police and say, you solve it. The police don't predict that you are going to commit a crime and then take you off the street before you commit the crime. That's not what policing is all about. So policing by definition is a reaction. Listen, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to get back into our subject. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we as a community of parents can be more effective in addressing these problems. If y'all stick with us, we will send us out of the break here at Living Now, Living Right Now.
Do you want to increase your home's value? Do you want to lower your energy bills? Are you in need of affordable financing for your next home improvement project? The CAO Home Improvement Resource Program can help. Just come to their monthly HIRP orientation session every second Wednesday of the month at 564 Dodge Street, Building 400. HIRP staff will help identify the resources you need to get financed, and they'll even help you with completing your application. You won't know what you qualify.
Mr. Hare, the technology does exist for catching you before you do it based on your past record. They just have not implemented yet. I've seen it.
All the home improvement programs you may be eligible for.
That's worse than racial profiling.
Program that can help turn your house into your dream home. Call 881-6543 for more info. It's the Home Improvement Resource Program, restoring value to neighborhoods across Erie County, one house at a time. Brought to you by the Community Action Organization of Erie County.
All right, welcome back to Living Now here at WFO Power 96.5 FM on your dial. This is L.Nathan Hare, your host. I'm here with Emmanuel Radford, who's doing the live streaming of the program. Again, if you want to participate in the show in terms of getting in your questions, comments, and concerns, you can type into your handheld device, your computer, Facebook, and then once you type in Facebook, type in Living Now, LIVING NOW, and the program will come up. You can type in your questions, your concerns, your observations, and we'll respond to them on the air. One of the things that I want to make sure that we get ourselves to focus on is what it is that we can do ourselves. So, for example, one of our listeners was talking about how much easier it is for somebody to kill somebody than it is for somebody to be able to get a job. That's true, right? It takes work to get a job. You can kill somebody in a microsecond. But as much as that is true, I would hope that what we can get ourselves to marshal our resources around are those things that we can control ourselves. What are the things that we can do ourselves? So if you're not working, why are you not working? Let's start there, okay? Right? So let's look at all the reasons why you might not be working. Well, there are some jobs, but they're too far away from where I am. Well, then we need to get together with a community of other adults in your family, in your friend circle, and so on, and say, how do we get Jamal or Billy or whoever you are to the job that is open over at U.S. Foods on Sheridan, near Alberta Street or wherever the job, happens to be. And let's attack getting people jobs and that way. Let's teach the person once you get a job, you got to spend 3 or 4 paychecks instead of spending that money on, whatever, I don't know what y'all spend money on, but obviously it's not on something that builds assets, right? Let's try to save, that money so that, I'm thinking if you've been living for the past 3 or 4 years with no money, you on the corner with somebody, out in front of a store with somebody, no money. If that's what you've been doing, you should be able to go 6 more weeks with, almost no money. And then take the money that you save and use that money to spend $500,000-$800,000 on a car. Just buy an old jalopy car. We all start. I don't know if y'all understand this. People don't start out buying, 2019 issue cars. Your first car is usually about 12 years older than you, right? That's the way the world works, right? You get an old jalopy, and then you keep working, you save money, you sell the old jalopy, and you get a less old jalopy, and you keep saving money, and then you get this is almost a car now, right? It's only 5 years old, right? And you keep rolling until you can get yourself a more new car, right? Why does everything have to come to everybody instantaneously? What gets into people's spirit that they think that they can start at the end of the race rather than starting at the beginning of the race? That's not the way the world works. So as adults, we've got to stop saying that out of our own mouths, acting like it's okay for people to talk like that, to think like that. And we've got to coach our young people to start thinking about what you have to do to assemble your life. Because if you don't do it the right way, if you try to do it the fast way, what usually happens is you fast track yourself into prison. And then your life not only starts at the finish line, you start behind the finish line. It's bad enough that you can't run that fast in the first place, right? Then you got to start 500 yards before the finish line in the first place, right? Then you wonder why you can't get there, ahead. So we've got to start thinking differently, and we've got to start talking differently amongst ourselves, right? So that's one way to get a job. Another piece of getting a job, you're just going to have to feel me on this, right? Sometimes you got to do stuff that you don't like doing. You ain't got to do it forever, right? One of my closest friends used to pick up dog poop at the Hamburg racetrack. Y'all know when them horses be running around them tracks and whatnot, they don't just run, right? They litter. they leave stuff behind them and so on, right? And somebody has to come and get that stuff, right? Well, that was his job. He would go out on the racetrack and he would pick up horse poop, okay? But they paid him, this is the mid-1980s, they paid him a little bit earlier than that, they paid him almost $200 a week to pick up horse poop. Well, in 1985, 1984, making $10 an hour was a decent piece of money. I know y'all that's y'all don't get that, right? But that was a decent piece of money, back then, right? It allowed him to pay his cable bill. It allowed him to take care of his kids. It allowed him to pay his rent note. It allowed him to buy a house, right? And so on. So you got to start changing your mind about what it is that you're willing to do. I took my first job in 1959 making 25 cents a bushel, right? Pulling onions out of the ground with a machete, okay? Now, it took me almost 1959 until 1972. It took me until 1972 before I started making more than $100 straight pay in a week without overtime, okay? Just so you understand, right? But you look at me today, I make literally 10 times as much money today as I made, excuse me, I said that wrong. I make 20 times as much money today as I used to make in 1972. 20 times as much. I had 4 employees in 1972, 9 employees. I have 832 employees now. The world will change. You will grow into your future, but you have to get on the path where your future is. You can't be on the path where there's no future and then keep running your mouth about, I don't have any future. How about getting on the path where the future is? How about that? Okay? Instead of just whining all the time, right? Instead of signifying, instead of all of the adults trying to rationalize why young people aren't doing what they ought to be doing, Coach him on what to do. And don't let people post up around you who are not willing to act to defend their own future, to create their own future. Why are you allowing people to sit up around you who aren't trying? Make the price of being around you that you have to be a person who tries. Make that the price. Then we have a community of people. You know how the people that the George Bush type people talk about, the coalitions of the willing? Right? Now, I'm not saying you want to be them, but the ideation makes sense, right? That you want to have a coalition of people who are trying. That's what we need to build our relationships around, right? It's like, if you're a young woman and you're looking for somebody to be your mate, some fella to be your mate, and you got a guy who don't get up every day, he don't go to work every day, he don't contribute anything to the household, he's just sitting there and whatnot, you got to let that go. You just got to let that go. It's not even hard to do. Just open your hands and let it go. Okay, right? See, that's what we got to do. So, let me just kind of talk a little bit about this idea of, can organizing parents be effective in reversing the trajectory of street violence? So just a little bit of research. If we look at the factors that seem to surround the perpetrators of violence, there may be clues about what we can do to prevent violence. So in this article written by the RAND Foundation called Children's Exposure to Violence, frequency may not be the best predictor of negative symptoms. I know that that's the theorem that we have. People have so many experiences with violence. They see violence on TV. They see, violence taking place in their communities, in their lives. And it's the frequency of violence that people sees that predisposes people towards violent behavior. Well, the research doesn't support that. The research says that one violent, traumatic event in your life can predispose you to become at risk to being either a victim or a perpetrator or both of violence. Just one, okay? See, you got to defend this gate all the time. This is what it's really telling us, right? You can't sort of massage it and say, she's only had like 4 violent experiences, so we don't have to worry about her. Oh, yes, you do. Yeah, you got to worry about her. So in this article, it talks about a 2009 survey that was done by the RAND Foundation using a nationally representative sample. 61% of the people were children aged 17 or younger that were in this national survey who had been exposed to a broad range of crime, violence, abuse, and so on. 46% of them had been exposed to physical assault. 25% of them had been exposed to property offenses, meaning somebody had stolen from them or stolen from the homes that they lived in. 10% had been victims of maltreatment by a parent or caregiver. 25% witnessed violence at home or in their community, and 6% were victims of sexual abuse. So when I looked at this analysis, here's how it began to percolate in my head. So from an exposure perspective, the main sources of children's exposure to violence are being assaulted by someone else in their own environment, right? 46% of these kids, right, were assaulted by somebody in their own environment, not assaulted by somebody else, right? See, when I lived in the Perry Projects, we used to have assaults by other people. People used to come from across the bridge and into our community and start stuff, right? So a lot of our assaultive experiences were because people from another community came and tried to assault us, and we had to respond by, our own assaulting of them, right? But that's not what's going on right now. Almost half of the children in our community are victims of being assaulted by somebody from their own community, either in their house or on their block. So that was one part of it. It said that the second highest source of violence in a child's life was property offense. Somebody stealing your bike, somebody stealing your lunch, somebody you stealing your coat or your sweater. You living at home and you come home and you find your TV's gone, your computer's gone, the window that used to be on the wall is now on the ground, that sort of stuff, right? And the third highest exposure of a child to violence is witnessing violence at home or in their community. So if these are the things these are the exposure sources, the critical exposure sources. Now, we talked about persons being treated poorly by their parent or their caregiver, but that's only 10% of the kids experience that. And only is not a good word. I'm just saying, out of all of these factors that I talked about, 10% is a lot lower than 25%, right? And in sexual abuse, again, horrid stuff, but that's 6% of the exposures that kids have experienced, as opposed to 46% who experience violence, physical assault, by people in their own community. So how do we reduce the normalization of violence in the life experience of our children? Because that's really what this is all about. You have to reduce the normalization of violence, right? So let me give you an example, what I'm talking about. I grew up in a family where, of all of the people who were older people, older than 16 or 18 in my family, when I was like 6 or 7 years old, all of the males who were 16, 17 years of age or older were all what we used to call players. They were pimps, they were dope dealers, they shot craps, cheated at craps, they shot pool, they boosted cars, they boosted clothes. That was the culture that I grew up in. Everybody who I needed to get respect from in my family was somebody who was a player. So in order for me to get respect, I had to at least demonstrate that I knew how to play. Whether I played or not, I needed to at least know how to play in order for them to feel like I was cool. Otherwise, I'd be looked down on, like I wasn't anybody and so on, right? Because being a player was normal in my family. Now, trust me when I'm saying this. This was not smart. This was not good. Many of my family members died, right? I mean, all of my first cousins on my father's side, all dead. None of them died of natural causes. All of them died before they were 40 years old. 3 of them died before they were 35 years old. Just so we clear about this, right? So don't take what I said to say, oh, well, Nate said it was normal, to be a player and whatnot. No, it's not normal to die when you're 32, when you're 25. That's not normal, right? So I'm just telling you that the ideation that I grew up with was such that I thought it was normal for men to be players, right? That's what's happening with violence in our community right now. We have allowed being violent, fronting violence, faking violence, actually committing violence, chasing violence with violence, responding to frustration, responding to conflict, responding to disappointment with violence. We have made that normal in the lives of the people in our communities. Well, of course they act like that because you act like that, because you act like you think it's okay. And even if you don't act like you think it's okay, you act like it's expected, like you just expect that it's going to occur. So if you expect something is going to occur and you don't treat it as if it is an anathema to your community, if it's a malignancy, as if it's a malignancy on your community, if you don't treat it like that, it becomes normalized in the minds of the people around you. Because in truth, it's normalized in your mind. And if it's normalized in your mind, it's going to be normalized in the minds of the people that you are around. So the only way we're going to be able to break this pattern is we're going to have to abnormalize violence. We have to make this abnormal. So somebody gets on your nerves, hitting them is not the solution. Somebody swears at you, shooting them is not the solution. Somebody tried to hit on some girl in your community. You live, on Wakefield and Fillmore, and somebody else lives on Spring and I don't know, Howard Street or someplace, and those streets don't cross, but you know what I'm talking about, right? say Spring and William, if that's your reality, somebody hits on some girl in your community, you can't respond to that with violence, okay? If she just likes somebody other than you, you just have to accept the fact that she likes somebody other than you and move on, right? Because you got a life that you have to live. So before we get to the break, let me just hit these two things that I think would be helpful to us. First, if we keep our children in some form of structured activity, starting immediately after school ends, and make this structure the normal staple of how we shepherd our children through their age 18 lives, we will radically reduce the opportunity for serious physical assaults to occur. In other words, get your kids out of the way. What I figured out for my child, my oldest daughter, and then the same thing was done with my stepdaughter, I keep control of all your minutes. All your minutes belong to me. Until you're able to stand in the world by yourself, all of your minutes belong to me. I govern all of them. So I get you up in the morning, I get you dressed, I get you fed, I take you to school. I expect the people who you go to school with, your teachers and your principals, to take care of you while you're there. I hold them accountable. When they get done and they ring the bell and says it's time to go home, I come and get you, right? Everybody can't do that, but that's what I did, right? And when I came to get you, I took you to Western New York Academy of Dance. I took you to the African American Culture Center, right? I took you to an after-school activity where there were caring adults around you 100% of the time. And when it got to be 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:15, I came there and got you and brought you home. So all of your time, you were either with me or you were in the custody of caring adults who were looking out for you. Now, it doesn't have to be that everybody has to be so closely, monitored. If you're in the playground, when I lived in the Perry Projects and Lanigan's Fieldhouse, Rollo Williams and these dudes were the big guys. They were paid by the housing development to govern, the field house and so on. So even though we're out there playing, they're not supervising every single thing that we did, but they were close enough to us that if something bad happened, they were there, to intervene and so on. So we got used to adults being around us, supervising that level of activity. So what that did is it turned us into people who saw those adults as the responsible people. Their values, their patterns, how they organize their lives became our values and our patterns and how we organize our lives. That's how we get this done. We have a caller hanging on. Let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you doing? Hello, caller, are you there? I'm not here. They left? Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't we take our last break, and then we can just kind of roll right on. So if you all stick with us, we will see you on the other side of the break here at Living Right Now.
Do you want to increase your home's value? Do you want to lower your energy bills? Are you in need of affordable financing for your next home improvement project? The CAO Home Improvement Resource Program can help. Just come to their monthly HIRP orientation session every second Wednesday of the month at 564 Dodge Street, Building 400. HIRP staff will help identify the resources you need to get financed, and they'll even help you with completing your application. You won't know what you qualify for until you call them today at 881-6543. That's 881-6543. Learn about all the home improvement programs you may be eligible for and ask about the affordable financing program that can help turn your house into your dream home. Call 881-6543 for more info. It's the Home Improvement Resource Program, restoring value to neighborhoods across Erie County, one house at a time. Brought to you by the Community Action Organization of Erie County.
All right, welcome back to Living Now here at WFO, Power 96.5 FM on your dial. This is L.Nathan Hare, your host. We're here with Emmanuel Radford, who's doing the live streaming of the program. You can call us again at 837-1112. That's 837-1112. You can also use your handheld device or your computer. Type in Facebook and then type in Living Now. The program will come up and you can type in your questions, your concerns, or your observations, and we respond to them on the air as we can. So we were talking about a couple of things that we could do to help us to reduce the normalization of violence in the lives, in the life experience of our children. So we just talked about the fact that if we keep our children in some form of structured activity starting immediately after school ends, and make sure that this structure, or make this structure the normal staple of how we shepherd our children through their pre-age 18 lives, we will radically reduce the opportunity for serious physical assaults to occur. That's the first thing you got to do. You got to just take, 90%, 95% of the potential violent situations. You just got to take them out of the queue altogether by keeping your kids in a situation where the stuff's just not going to occur, right? Now, I didn't ask you to have those kids, so let's be clear about this, okay? So I'm not talking about, me trying to impose something on you. You imposed this on yourself when you decided to have kids, okay? So if you're gonna have kids, you're gonna take care of your kids, this is how you can keep your kids so that when they get to be 18, 20 years old, you still got them. Because if you don't do this right, you're not gonna have them. And you're gonna feel differently if you don't have your kids and you say, if I had done A, B, and C, D and E would not have happened, to my child, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is you need to ensure that whenever your children are not with you, that they are in an environment where trusted, caring adults are around all of the time, not some of the time. You don't get to go down the block, around the corner, and hang out and then come back and see me 3 hours later. Nope, we don't do that. And if people think that you're a square, write it on a piece of paper and just hand it to them. I'm a square. Yep, there you go. Yep, Nate's a square. There you go, right? I mean, because, a time is going to come when your children are going to have to enter into adulthood. And they're going to have to become people who are educated enough and strong enough to be able to stand economically on their own. Because if they don't, they're going to be 35 years old still sitting on your couch, eating your food, right? Driving your car, on your gas, okay? I'm just trying to help you, right? See? So you want your children to grow up. You don't want them to be babies, dependent on you for the rest of their life. You want them to be able to make that stand. They can't make that stand if they can't get through school. They can't get through school if you're allowing them to be sucked into a lot of expectations and, community, distractions that are not helpful. Running around here, tattooing yourself, running around here trying to have sex when you're 13 years old, running around here not going to school because that makes you cool, running around here not learning because you don't want somebody to think you white. What is the matter with you? We built entire planets being black. What does being uneducated have to do with not being black? Who told you that? Why would you allow somebody to say something like that to you? I don't want you to be violent, but you should get loud at somebody who says something like that to you, okay? Don't let that be said. What are the risks associated with children's exposure to violence? How does exposure to violence affect children in ways that might make them perpetrators of violence or more likely to become victims of violence? Not all children experience measurable harm, but exposure to violence has been linked to various developmental and mental consequences, including depression, which is a child feeling isolated, feeling hopeless, feeling seriously dejected, feeling despondent, feeling in despair. Anxiety, a child showing signs of being afraid, who is fretful much of the time, who seems to feel tied up as if she or he is caught between choices that seem bad and no choices that seem good. See, whenever a child is in a situation where they don't feel they have any good choices, they got bad choices on one side and they got really bad choices on the other side, that child's going to feel trapped, right? And because they're a child, they have limited experience. So how do you respond with limited experience? Okay? Now, I'm saying this to you because, everything I say to you generally has some root in what happened to me in my life, right? And so I'm saying this to you as somebody who, very smart, I was well ahead in school, 2 grades ahead in school, and so on. But my emotional intelligence was like, a one-day-old person. Yeah, I had really serious emotional intelligence deficits. So because of that, whenever I felt trapped, My response was to bring everything down to a level that I could understand. Let's just fight. Because I understood you're on this side, I'm on that side. If I win, whatever I say is what happens. If you win, whatever you say is what happens. That was what I was able to process. Well, that's just crazy. I mean, you don't want your children to be thinking like that, right? I'm just telling you that that's what happens inside the minds of children who feel trapped in a situation where they have what they perceived as bad choices on one side of the equation and really, really, really bad choices on the other side of the equation. They feel like they have no choices at all. That's called being in despair, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. I know we've talked about that in our communities a lot. It's a condition that occurs when, or in children and adolescents as a result of a child's exposure to one or more traumatic events, actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. When that happens to a child, this puts an imprint in this child's psychology. These are like a tape. You know, you ever see a record skip? And it just, well, maybe y'all don't do that because y'all don't have records anymore. I keep forgetting y'all come from a different world, right? But in the world that I grew up in, you had like records, right? And sometimes, a flaw would occur, on the record, and the record wouldn't be able to get past a certain groove. So the record would skip. It would just go back and start replaying the same piece of the song over and over again, right? Like the same 6 or 8 second, stretch of the song is repeated over and over and over again. Well, that's what happens in a child's mind when a child has a really traumatic experience. So, for example, let's suppose you're 4 years old and you get raped, by, some older person in your environment. When do you think that's going to go away in that child? That child's going to have that like lightning inside their psychology that's going to keep replaying itself over and over and over in the child's mind. Often what happens with a child who experiences that is they will do other things that create different kinds of trauma that replace the trauma that they are most afraid of or that they are most intimidated by, right? That's why they become fire setters. That's why they become assaulters themselves, and so on for just that reason. Do we have a caller hanging on there? Yep. All right. Let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller. Are you there?
Yes. Good morning, Mr.
Hey,
Hare.
Mother Doyle. How you doing?
Well, today is the first day of me writing my dissertation.
Oh, you're on it now. You're on the path.
So it's really going to be a challenge, but I have a certain schedule I follow, so I'm actually not going to start it until maybe about 3 or 4 o'clock, and I'll work right through 10 or 11 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, say a prayer for me.
I'm doing that now.
But I know it's late. I was busy trying to get my materials together, but I don't know, you might have addressed this, but what impact on this violence do you think our videos, the children, young people looking at the games they play that are violent, the music they hear, because Reverend Frederick Gelsey is really speaking on this in his homicide prevention program,
mm-hmm.
and saying that influences our youth a great deal.
Right. Here's where I think that comes in. It comes in the sense that we are normalizing violence in the minds of our children. It's not the same as when you saw the Smurfs, and some little critter, smacks another little critter, and knocks him over and whatnot, because even your children know that that's a fantasy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you hear it in songs, you see it actually done by human beings in movies and in television programs where people are being shot, blown to bits, and so on, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's moving along. People kiss after they, blow somebody's head off, and that sort of stuff. What we're doing is we're normalizing violence in the mind of our people. And if you normalize violence, whenever a person gets pushed in a certain way, when a person gets pushed, then that person is going to react in whatever's been normalized in them.
Mm-hmm.
So I give the example of the boxer. You ever see the boxers where one guy is like a puncher? He doesn't dance around and whatnot. He just runs up to you and punches you. And the other guy is a boxer. He's dancing
Mm-hmm.
around. So you want to help the puncher become a better boxer, so you teach him how to do all of the dancing and whatnot. As soon as the puncher gets hit, he stops dancing right away. He does what's normal to him, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens with violence. If you keep normalizing violence in the minds, in the spirit, in the experience of people, whenever conflict occurs, frustration occurs, that sort of thing happens, they'll go to what's normal. They will go to violence. You have to make violence abnormal.
I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to I'm hoping and praying for the MVP group.
Mm-hmm.
I like their message. I like what they're doing, and reaching the parents, as you said. To me, this is one of the keys. So I wish them the very best. Certainly want to express my condolences to the Johnson family. They're holding that funeral this morning as I am speaking at True Bethel Baptist Church. So we have a lot to work on, and so I'm glad you're speaking out on these issues. And thank you so much, Mr. Hare. And I hope that I can come up with some air after writing all of this. I'll be writing all summer.
All right.
Right into the fall. Thank you again for your program.
Thanks, Mother Doyle. And for those of you out there for the MVP program, if you write this number down, 903-5590, that's 903-5590. You'll have somebody from the MVP program to give you more information. The meeting is going to be this Thursday at 6 o'clock at the CAO headquarters at the corner of Leroy and Halbert. I appreciate all of you all participating. Look forward to talking to you all next week here at Living Now, Living Right Now.
Thank you for listening.